Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist. In this video, talking about what makes a good survival knife versus what makes a bad survival knife. Now, I've talked about this so many times in the past. My idea of a survival knife is a knife that is big enough to do what you need to be done, small enough just to actually be carried. I actually prefer a little bit of larger knives, but there's also something to be said about something that you can have with you when you need it. Usually, the bigger the knife, the more likely it is to stay home. Usually, you're looking about a 7-8 inch ideal Goldilocks type of length. That's usually what I find to be the best balance, and it's also confirmed by knives like the K-bar and some of the more famous legendary knife designs that have served people and mankind throughout history. It's something about that length that people feel comfortable with. In terms of what a survival knife is, for some people they look at a little knife like this and they say, yeah, that's a survival knife. Usually the people that think this makes a survival knife are the more bushcrafty type of folks. They basically want something that just cuts. And these candy grain blades, your Moras and so on, they are great at doing just that, at cutting. And they can be fantastic knives in survival situations. Definitely a lot better than even a huge number of knives out there that are not all that good. These are great knives, and I definitely do recommend them. Now, my idea of a survival knife will involve something a little bit of a longer blade and maybe thicker stock, something that can crush, hammer, and chop better than your Mora. This is going to be doing 90% of the tasks you need, even in survival situations. But for those things that you want a bigger knife, then you start looking at other options. So about 7-8 inch blade length, a thicker stock of a knife, and quality manufacturing, good steel. I personally like stainless steel better. I think that if you have a good stainless steel, you're gonna be getting a blade that does everything your carbon steel knife does, even better at times, depending on specifically what steel you're using. And it's gonna be easier not only to avoid rust, which sometimes is played as a need. For example, one of the videos I did before, I showed this knife, which is carbon steel. This was completely rusted, but it can clean just nicely with a little bit of steel wool and some WD-40. You just clean it and leaves just a little patina. Now, if you're looking at a long-term survival situation where all of this gets wet, you want to have a knife that's really not rusting on you. That in my knife, yes, this is my survival knife. I designed this, and it's made by Aitor in Spain. This is my idea of an ideal survival knife. If I could have designed my own survival knife, and I actually got the privilege of doing so, this is my concept of that knife. So stainless steel about this, and yes, of course, full tang and with a nice thick stock. This is a steel that I specifically selected. N680 is a beast. It's one of Boiler's tougher steels, and it has great edge retention as well, and is super stainless. It's actually a steel that is often used for diving knives. It's super resistant to salt. So yeah, I think it's a great balance for a survival knife. You have a line that is maybe more on the combat side of things, especially when you look at Glock. Glock definitely is more leaning towards the, yes, we want a utilitarian tool, but we want a fighting knife as well. And that's where this comes into play. Maybe the serrations are not all that neat because they don't work all that well. Aitor actually makes some awesome serrations, and they cut very, very well. I went without serrations because, personally, even though I struggle with that a little bit, like Glock, I wish I could have both options available in the market. Eventually, that may be an option you have. Now, this is the one I like the most without the serration, especially that they're not done all that well in the Glock. But yes, more of the stabby dagger fighting knife. But yes, it does okay as a survival knife in general, especially for the price. But if you're looking at some of the the best survival knives, I usually go with this size. You know, one of my favorite knives would be this one. This is a Busty, actually it's a Psycho brand, but it's all made by Busty, Busty Combat. This is one of the typical blade geometries that I think works very, very well. I do like the recurve edge a little bit more. I find that it kind of catches material when you're slicing a little bit better, and it's giving a little bit of a chopping action because of the weight distribution of this kind of geometry. And you know, these are great knives. The Infi steel is famous for being one of the toughest knives in the world, and for many it is one of the best options in terms of a survival knife steel. I do find it after many years, and yeah, I have a lot of Busty knives. They're not exactly cheap, but I'm fortunate enough to have several of these. They are great. They don't have all that great edge retention. I won't say that they're soft because that's ridiculous. It is not the case, but edge retention, and guys, there's really no magic. Anything that is very tough will usually have not all that great edge retention. There's super steel and there's boutique premium steels that do very great in both. It gets to a point where, man, it gets difficult to sharpen, and that's definitely something you don't want in your survival knife. So it's all about finding that balance also in terms of price. You can have a super high quality knife that is very tough and has great edge retention. How much are you really paying for that? Is it really worth compared to alternatives that are maybe half the price and pretty much do the same thing? So all of these considerations come into play when you design a knife like this. And another great option that I found, that the Finnish army knife. This is the Peltonen M95 Ranger. Look it up, but there's the name of the manufacturer. Very clever design, Finland. It is a little bit sharp here, which kind of sucks. I wish it wouldn't be. A very well designed knife. Now, this is very similar. You know, if you start looking at it, it's not all that different from some of the larger blades. And if you look at it in terms of functionality, how much different is it, this $20 knife from this $100 knife, or whatever, $150, whatever is going these days? Yes, it has this thicker stock, which for a survival knife, in my opinion, this is a requirement. Now, this is carbon steel, very tough carbon steel, and it has a nice Teflon, you know, frying pan kind of finish, which is great. Yeah, but this is not going to be rusting. This will eventually rust, and this doesn't need the finish to begin with, which is, you know, what I went for myself in my idea of a survival knife. These are great though. I like these quite a bit. But let's talk about some of the bad designs that you have out there in the market. And that's where people sometimes are confused in terms of, wow, this is an awesome survival knife. Well, really? It depends. For example, this one. This is a knife that I got. And check out that blade. Look at that blade, how cool it is. This is a great geometry for a big survival knife, right? You love this. I love it. I love this blade geometry. I think it's very well thought, and yeah, it even has the recurve and, you know, bigger blade, sure, but I like this quite a bit. Now look at the tang. This is something that, if you haven't seen it on the inside, this had like a woody, plasticky thing going on. It looked like a super robust knife, when in reality, this knife is less robust, especially in the original format. This is less robust than this tiny $5 knife. This broke on me the first day I used it because it had a very thin, you know, screw here, you know, almost half as thick as this one that you see that I welded into place, messy because I'm no welder. You know, I did a crappy job, but it's very robust. Now, even using it like this, it does not break. And I baton and chopped quite a bit with it, and it seems to be holding up just fine. So I'm going to be getting doing a proper grip for it. You know, get a handle there. But originally it was very thin and it broke the first time you use it. So great blade geometry, terrible construction. An example of not so great blade geometry would be the straight. So here you have an example of a knife that it looks good, and I actually thought it would be a much better knife than it ended up being. This is just too damn thick. Look at how thick it is. You can go too far with something that is good and end up having the opposite result. Now the handle is not all that great. These panels were not good. I changed these myself. The quality of the material is not all that great. The screw broke just by using it. I did my Kata handle, and it's a little bit better now, at least for me, but the geometry it's not all that good. Just too thick, too short, and maybe for a much bigger knife, I don't know, but this is just too thick for what you have. If you don't design things properly, look at these two. These two are pretty much the same thickness, right? But look at the difference in terms of the bevel that you have. This is just too steep, just too steep. This is basically like a chisel. Now this is pushing into the chisel level, but because it's high enough, even though it's a full flat and it has a secondary bevel, which, yeah, I did touch this up myself a little bit and change the angle some, so as we have a little bit more of a steeper angle, so that it would cut better. But this is barely, this is right there in the limit. This crosses the limit into, dude, you just gave me a freaking chisel. Yes, I can sharpen this chisel myself, and it will cut decently enough, but it is so steep that it's going to be losing that edge way too fast for my taste. Okay, so an example of a knife that really not all that well designed, and the results you have are not so great. A Condor knife, and Condor is a good brand. This is a knife that I got back in the day. I like the big, chunky, heavy. Look at the stock. This is a good like middle ground, because even though it doesn't look all that thick, right? Especially when you compare, oh, this is better because it's thicker. No, it really depends on the knife and the design and the general geometry that it has. For this is just too thick. This same stock in this blade would be terribly heavy. It would be counterproductive to have such a thickness in such long blade. Now that is just fine. The blade geometry, I think it could have been a little bit more pointy. Why not? This looks like a little short machete. Kind of. Machetes are really lighter and faster in the hand. The problem with this knife is the handle. It's a design that it's just too rounded, and you don't have much friction. And really, when I design a grip myself for a knife, I want something that has more of a flat surface on each side, so that your hand will not rotate on that. I don't want this thing rotating if I'm twisting and putting pressure on that. So I like the idea of, yes, rounded so as to be comfortable, but good retention and not rotating in my hand. This is just too rounded, and actually it's kind of short. Look at how short that is. I don't have huge hands. I have maybe medium to large hands based on gloves and so on, but man, I'm barely there. It's just a little bit short for me. I could use half an extra centimeter here or so, half an inch maybe. But if you have a large hand, some guy with a big paw, this is gonna be just too short. This will be just too short for your hand. And I think these are made in Central America, where people maybe have smaller frame folks, and they didn't see this as much. But this is just too rounded, too short. Anyway, guys, aspects of design where you have knives that may seem okay, but unless you actually know what you're looking at, especially something like this where the problem is hidden, you don't know what's going on. When you don't know what's going on, assume the worst, unless you have good information, like in the case of the Glock knife, where imagine if this was super thin stock and it just cracked on you the first time you use it. That's the kind of thing you're looking to avoid. Anyway, I leave links for some of this stuff available in Amazon. My own knife, you can find it in Aitor, their official website. You usually find it in my links. I'm super happy with it, and really, it's not even about the money thing. It's I squeeze the budget as much as possible so as to just get it done. That was the objective for me. Not making a fortune out of this or anything even close to that. It's really not that way. I just wanted to have this done, and yeah, super happy with it. If you're looking for a survival knife, man, for the money, I think these are still going for under $100 if you use the code which is the name of the channel, the Modern Survivalist. You use a code in their website, and I think it's still giving you like a 20% discount, putting it way under those $200 budget. For this size of a knife, a full stock, a full tank knife of quality stainless steel made in Europe, you will not find another one for the same price. If you do, let me know. I'll even buy one myself because I'm always looking for interesting knives. See you in the next video, guys. Take care.